Welcome back to the last chapter of Storybaggers. On with the story. Boo looked sideways at the little fruit bat beside him. They had instinctively started flying shoulder to shoulder as the number of vampires that they had had to dodge increased, and as the Horrorsom Heights started to tower over them. Having reached the heights as the sun was rising, and realising that Bobble was too tired to go on, they spent the day sleeping as best they could, hanging from a branch of a withered tree that grew just a few metres from the entrance to the tunnels. In the short time that they had been together, Boo had learnt a new respect for Bobble. He knew that the fruit bat's wing was hurting, but he hadn't heard him make a single complaint. He was probably too scared. But if Bobble was scared, then it was a wonder Boo could fly at all. He was terrified. He knew what lay inside those tunnels. He'd met Old Batwings. Boo's brain was racing. He knew that they would get one shot at this. If they were discovered, then he couldn't imagine what the consequences would be. They were literally unimaginable. Their plan was insane. No one in their right mind would think of doing such a thing, which might give them an advantage. And anyway, it was the only plan they had, so better get on with it then. Okay, Bobble, ready to do this? Fighting an unhelpful desire to giggle, Bobble bit his lip and nodded. Let's do it. How bad can it be? He did not find Boo's lack of response encouraging. Boo shook out his little black netting bag. Right, come on then, get in. In the time that Bobble and Boo had been flying, Dr. Kumori and the council had not been sitting on their claws. The alarm had been raised, and the battalion was getting ready to take what might be their final battle to Old Batwings. Brown rats were mustering in Haven's streets to the cheers of the smaller folk, and seagulls screamed back intelligence from the squadrons of birds that were returning from the day's patrols. Bobble's mum gave Bendigo 3 cups of her extra-strength acorn and prune medicine, and made him down them to the last drop as she cleaned and repatched the wound that still gaped under his left wing. They both knew that he shouldn't be flying anywhere, but there was no choice. Bobble was in danger. Bobble's and Vesper's dads waited with Dr. Kumori and the other adults for the signal to fly. This battle was going to be at night. It would be up to the bats. And then, as if tuned into the same signal, the rank of bats rose into the evening air and the sky went black. Haven was going to the heights. Now, after the main body of fighting bats and rats had gone, a certain amount of other activity was also taking place. Bobble's mum had waited until the others had gone, before picking up a small crabapple branch that she kept for emergencies. It was old wood, hard and knobbly, and there was one wrinkled old crabapple still attached to the end of it. Never mind, it would do. If anyone seriously thought that Minty Mallenby was going to hang about in the crabapple, waiting for news of her only son, who was out there facing Haven knows what, then they had quite another thought coming. Minty Mallenby was jolly well going to sort it out! Vesper had not been idle either. He knew that Bobble and Boo had had no choice in leaving without him, but he was not happy about Boo taking his place next to Bobble. He, Big V, was Bobble's wingman, and that was all there was to say about it. He rounded up the rest of the double A's, and they started off after the others. Even Blossom was eager to go, rallied by Vesper's stirring call to action.
Bobble needs you! The stories need you! I need a plum right now. Who's got one?
By the time Vesper and the rest of the class reached Haventown, it was obvious from the sounds coming from the far field that the adults were already dealing with some of the vampire bats. Bats were being thrown out of the sky down onto the grass, where the waiting rats were putting the boot in. It wasn't pretty. Blossom tried to drown out the squeals and groans by trilling loudly. Not even Pippin objected this time. Even Blossom's version of "Someday my plum will come" was preferable to the noise of the skirmishing. Sticking to the edge of the field, they managed to fly without being noticed. Vesper raised his eyes to the dark stain that was the heights.
We're coming, Bobble! Just hang on in there!
Hanging on in there pretty much summed up Bobble's current role in proceedings. It was Boo who had the thankless task of hauling the fruit bag, as he now thought of his story bag, down the tunnels. The tunnels were hot as usual, and inside the bag, poor Bobble was finding it hard to breathe. Outside the bag, Boo, panting like a sardine in a sauna, was thanking his lucky stars that he'd got landed with Bobble rather than Vesper. How long? Not far now. The effort of talking proved too much, and Bobble never did get to hear the end of Boo's sentence. He did, however, detect a slight cooling of the air that passed through the little holes of the bag, as if they were in a sudden draught or had flown into a bigger space. As he flapped laboriously into Cathedral Cavern, Boo was painfully aware that bagging Bobble and pretending that he was a captured happy ending was the entirety of their plan. It had been enough to get them into the cavern, and it might be enough to fool the couple of beefy bats that hung on either side of the old bat chair. But would it be enough to get past Old Batwings? The ancient devil was busy probing a collapsed mouth ulcer with his tongue. Nasty. His sharp eyes gleamed when he saw the haul that Boo was carrying. "We meet again, young Prue. What have you brought me this time? Something for me to get my teeth into, I hope?" The bag seemed to twitch in response to this, and Old Batwings clapped his claws together in malicious delight. "It's alive! I do so love a live one. Which happy ending is it, boy? Quick! Which one are we going to kill?" Well, this is awkward, thought Boo, as he struggled to hold on to the neck of the quivering bag. He had hoped to be dismissed with the bag, perhaps to be allowed to take it down into the secret place at the end of the inky tunnel behind the old bat chair. Chair, he thought wildly. Bears. Bears? 3 bears. You know, the one with the bowls and the chairs. Chairs? Yes, bear chairs. For bear bums. Boo had no idea what made him say that. It was some sort of reckless comic necessity. Fortunately for him, Old Batwings did not have a sense of humour, and was still puzzling over what was in the bag. He was just leaning forward, ready with a claw to hook the bag and get a closer look at what this young rascal had brought him, when there was a commotion at the entrance to the cavern. "Boss! Boss! It's the battalion! They're here! They're lining up to fight! What shall we do?" "Do? What shall we do? You imbecile! We'll smash them to smithereens, of course. We'll pluck out their gizzards and pick out their eyeballs. We'll rip them from the sky." Old Batwing's roar of rage and defiance gave him the strength to launch himself out of the old bat chair. For a massive, manky old bat, he was horribly fast. Boo threw himself to one side of the chair as the huge vampire shot past on his way out to the tunnels, an ancient nightmare released. His beefy bats went with him. Boo didn't waste a second. In a couple of flaps he was down Old Batwing's private tunnel, the still trembling bag in claw. A moment later and a frazzled fruit bat fell out into the hot darkness. "You cut that a bit fine! He was going to eat me!" "A simple thank you would be nice. I saved your bacon." "You put my bacon in the frying pan." "Do you want to go back into this bag?" Bobble shuddered. "Never again. I'd rather die flying." He flapped his wings to smooth out the creases, then looked at Boo. "Sorry. Actually, you were fantastic. I like the bare bum thing." They looked about them. "Where do we go?" Boo shrugged. "Down here somewhere. I've never been, but I guess we just follow the tunnel down." Glad to be on the move again, the two friends flew down into the darkness. Outside the tunnels, an almighty battle was raging in the air and on the ground. Bendigo was leading a squadron of masked bats as they whirled and smashed their way through wave after wave of vampires. They were magnificent. A coordinated black tide of destruction that shattered anything it came into contact with. Any stragglers were set upon by the fruit bats and rats. The double A's were playing their part too. Vesper, desperately flapping up towards the tunnel entrance to find Bobble and Boo, had been set upon by a scrawny vampire bat who was biting and scratching whichever part of Vesper came to claw. Racing to his side, Pippin and Blossom grabbed a vampire wing each and managed to pull it off. Taking a deep breath, Vesper bunched his claw and smacked the vampire hard on the nose.
"Take that, you scrubby bat!" "Hey, I did it again! Pip! Blossom! Did you hear me rhyme? I can't help myself."
Vesper Thistle was so proud of his superhero banter that he didn't see the moment that Old Batwings erupted from the tunnel just behind him. He did hear it, though. He turned slowly, mouth open, to face the enormous old vampire who was stretched out over him like a murderous awning. For a long, silent moment, nothing existed in Haven but Vesper and Old Batwings. Vesper could not have moved if he had wanted to, and he did want to, very badly. He stayed put, frozen with terror, as the ancient devil folded his enormous wings and lurched towards him on foul, scrabbly legs. And Minty Mallenby flew in to meet him. Bobble's mum placed herself squarely between Vesper and the terror that was Old Batwings, and she was furious. "You scabby old devil, where do you think you're going? Don't you know? It's all over when the Bat Lady swings." And she raised her crabapple branch like a hockey stick and sent it flying. Bendigo heard the howl from where he was slashing, high overhead, and watched in astonishment as Old Batwings fell backwards, clutching his nose in pain, a shriveled-up crabapple lodged firmly up one nostril. At his sharp command, the wing of the masked bat wheeled and dived towards the stricken vampire. Deep in the darksome down, Bobble and Boo had finally found the secret place where all the stories were hung up to die. The two young bats gaped in horror at the rows and rows of hooks driven into the rock ceiling. There were hundreds of them. So, no time to lose then. With one quick glance at each other, they split and flapped over to different sides of the cavern, where they started nipping at the necks of the dangling story bags. One by one, glimmer by glimmer, the story sparks were set free. Some had been hanging in the darkness for so long that they fell rather than flew, and their light was faint and fitful. But within seconds they started to regain their brilliance, and soon the whole of the secret place was shining, pulsing like a hot star. Bobble looked across at Boo with satisfaction, the light dancing in his eyes. It was working! It really was! He wasn't sure how safe a place it was now, with all that wild story energy whizzing about, but there was no going back. So Bobble and Boo kept biting. Outside, all hell had broken loose as the wing of masked bats smashed into the beefy guards surrounding Old Batwings. Bendigo had landed badly beside Minty and Vesper and ripped the dressing from underneath his wounded wing. Blood was pouring down his side, but he pulled himself up to stand between the fruit bats and the vampire. "Crawl back into your wormhole, Batwings. There's no place for you here in the fresh air." But Bendigo staggered slightly as he issued the challenge. Old Batwings tipped his head to one side, spotted the gaping wound, and opened his mouth. For one horrible moment, Vesper thought he was going to sink his teeth into Bendigo, but the old devil was actually laughing. It was a cruel, rasping sound, and it set Vesper's fur on edge. Bendigo straightened himself up and stared the devil straight in the eye. "Something funny, Batbrains?" "Ah, dearie me, good old Bendy, is it? Not so bendy now, I think. More like broken. I remember you. And you, I know, remember me. Well, remember this. You couldn't save them last time, and you can't save them now." And Old Batwings reared up, stretching out his terrible clawed wings to their full extent. It felt to Vesper, crouching in the cold shadow of these wings, as if the stars had been snuffed out. And he shut his eyes to avoid seeing what he knew must come. In that long moment, waiting to hear the last defiant cry of the greatest masked bat that ever lived, Vesper was shocked instead to hear Dr. Komori's calm voice. Vesper opened his eyes. The teacher was standing on a small rock a little way down the slope. He had his claws folded neatly inside his cuffs, and he was actually smiling at the old monster, seemingly enjoying what was about to happen. "Many congratulations, Batwings. It would appear that the tide of events has turned your way. It seems that you have won the day." Dr. Komori's smile grew wider. Vesper shook his head. This was all wrong. This couldn't be the end. He couldn't stop the tears that were starting to fall. Bobble was still inside that vampire nest somewhere in the dark. Why wasn't Dr. Komori fighting like Bendigo and the rest of them to get him out? Why was he smiling at Old Batwings, as if they were sharing some secret joke? And for one horrible moment, Vesper Thistle wondered whose side their teacher was on, and then he looked again, and realised that Dr. Komori was not smiling at the vampire. He was looking past him to the entrance of the tunnels, to where tiny, faint sparkles had started flying out, shooting up into the night sky like the first wild sparks from a campfire. Dr. Komori chuckled. "Yes, many congratulations. It would seem that you have got exactly what you wanted. Your very own happy ending." Old Batwings looked at the black-capped bat, his mouth agape, as the meaning of what he had just said sank slowly into the depths of his wicked old brain. The moment's distraction was all that Minty Mallenby needed, and she regripped her crabapple branch. She was going in to get Bobble, and no one was going to stand in her way. But before she could get a flap closer, an enormous rumbling started from deep within the heights. Like an earthquake, it shook teeth and rattled bones. All living creatures on the ground and in the air stopped what they were doing and looked towards the mountain. In later years, young bats would be told how a river of fire cascaded through the tunnels and erupted into the night air in a volcano of story sparks. They would be told how the light turned the night into day from the heights to Haventown. but nothing they were told could match the jaw-dropping magnificence of the sight and the joy of those watching as one fruit bat and one vampire bat, slightly soiled, flew out of the tunnel, carried along on a tidal wave of happy endings. Dr. Komori looked sternly at Old Batwings, who was pinned down by 4 masked bats and bleeding freely from his right nostril, from which a puckered-up crabapple had been extracted. "What you have done is wicked, Batwings. It is wrong. You have endangered our stories. You have tried to kill happy endings. Stories belong to everyone, both here and in the Red World. They are our responsibility to treasure and protect. We will need to consider how to deal with you and with those who carried out your commands. But I foresee that your greatest punishment will be this: that stories will be told about you for generations to come. Over time, I hope you will learn to appreciate the irony that yours is the story which ends with the biggest happy ending of all." The teacher noticed the double A's hanging back quietly to one side, and he smiled at them. "Didn't I tell you, class? The bigger story will always take care of itself." And he straightened Vesper's waistcoat and winked. "Remember, this is Haven, and Haven is where stories go to unwind. It's also home to many simple folk who make their own stories up as they go along, because, after all, everyone has their own story. And sometimes, a story like theirs, well, it may just turn out to be the most important story of all." We hope you've enjoyed listening to our story. We've certainly enjoyed filming it for you. Thanks to my mum for writing it, my dad for filming it, Caitlin for the amazing artwork, and my brother for playing the part of Vesper and the sign. And as always, stay safe everyone, stay inside, and good night.
Goodbye.